The dinner between Jacob and Sophie's family went smoothly after the truth of the situation became increasingly clear to all four of them. However, the tension didn't seem to melt. Dracon was still worried about his daughter. Helen was trying to pacify everyone. Sophie continued to pout with the decision of her marriage. And Jacob, well, he was dealing with it all. The family began to eat after clearing the air, and slowly, light chit-chat about work and the weather began. During the conversation, Jacob learned that the interiors of the house were done by Helen herself. Helen's non-dragon identity was that of an interior designer and architect, and she was a renowned name in her field of work. As Helen revealed more about her work, Jacob was surprised to find that one of the top 10 landmarks in the area was a masterpiece designed by Sophie's mother. It was the stadium shown in the promotional pictures of the administration brochures of his university. It just finished construction last year. Jacob was impressed. Her father is a successful businessman, and her mother is an outstanding designer. The family is not just kind-hearted, but has also acquired wealth and have made commendable achievements. Even if they weren't dragons, Sophie has so many reasons to be proud of her parents. While dining, Helen was the one who spoke to Jacob. Dracon ate quietly beside her and would nod or add a word or two to the conversation. Sophie ate with her head low, trying to focus on the food, but actually made a mess out of everything on her plate. Her peas were smashed, her chicken was in shreds, and her gravy and potatoes were all merged together. She clearly had a lot going on in her mind. "Are your parents out of the country?" Helen asked Jacob. "Yes, they should be back next month," Jacob answered. Helen thought for a few moments and said, "How about a meetup between the two families when your parents come back?" Jacob's heart sank. He was barely beginning to accept his new circumstances and the fact that Sophie was going to be his wife in the near future. Helen's request only brought him more unease. "If Mom and Dad learned that I found a high school girl and chose her to be my wife, I have no idea how they would react." Helen could sense Jacob's hesitation, but continued talking. "Since everything is settled, it's normal for the two families to meet, isn't it?" Jacob looked at Helen and understood her perspective as a mother. She was right. They had every right to meet Jacob's family. Sophie couldn't take it anymore and burst out saying, "I didn't say I'll marry him." Helen's voice turned firm, with a hint of harshness. "You have to be responsible for the mistake you made. If you hadn't decided to make rain on your own, or run off after he swallowed your core, we wouldn't be in this situation at all. Are you being defiant because you want others to bear the consequences of your wrongdoings?" Sophie stopped talking. She knew that she was in the wrong, yet she was very unwilling to marry a complete stranger, that too a college man, for this kind of mistake. "Jacob is thoughtful, and I am happy with him being a part of this family." Helen looked at Sophie seriously. "You're not a child anymore, and you can't always lose your temper every time something goes away you don't like. You have to be mature and start realizing your responsibility. How long can your dad and I protect you? We also want you to learn from what has happened. You can't continue to act like a spoiled child." Sophie turned her eyes away from her mother. She wanted to cry, but she didn't want to disgrace herself in front of Jacob. All that she could do was bite her lip and endure it. Sophie's father remained silent. He obviously agreed with what Helen said. Jacob felt that there was another meaning behind how Sophie's parents were treating this matter. However, Sophie was too young to understand. Is Helen trying to hint at something? Can it be that even with their status and abilities, there are still some dangers that they can't talk about? Jacob. Helen turned and looked at him directly. Sophie still has the temper of a child. Please bear with her in the future. Yes, I know. At this time, Jacob could only agree. Sophie's face became red and blotchy, and her eyes welled with tears. Dracon sensed her feelings and said gently, "Go and get some rest, if you're done with your dinner, Soph." Sophie nodded and went upstairs, climbing up slowly. Each thud of her footsteps resounded in the dining room. Jacob watched her stomping upwards, and then turned around to look at Helen and Dracon. Helen said. Jacob smiled awkwardly and began to focus on the remaining food on his plate. Honestly speaking, what do you think of Soph? Helen asked after a few minutes had passed. She has taken a big decision at a young age, and I admire her courage. She is a wise and tough girl, and I think she will do very well in her life. Jacob expressed honestly. Sophie wasn't exactly acting mature right now, but who wouldn't want to run away from a situation like this, especially at her age? You're much more mature than her. Please take care of her for us. Her father and I are usually busy, as we have a lot on our plate at all times. That's why we don't have much time to take care of her. It has made her personality more stubborn and arrogant. Helen looked at Jacob sincerely. I'll do what I can. Jacob nodded. Even though he didn't really know how to take care of Sophie, he wanted to learn how to, for her parents' sake. He could understand how Sophie was feeling right now. When he was young, his parents were also busy working, and didn't take care of him much. Therefore, he was more independent, and had been a bit self-centered as well. It was fortunate that he had a caring grandma who always looked after him. Thanks to her, he had nice memories of his childhood. Sophie had nobody that would pull her out of her hyper-independent cocoon. Loud stomping was heard overhead. Helen looked concerned. Jacob, could you please go upstairs and keep Sophie company? Jacob nodded, and immediately put down his fork and got up. He was done with dinner anyway. He climbed up the stairs, glancing at a few abstract paintings that hung on the walls along the staircase. Jacob walked slowly. It felt like he was inside an art gallery. Through a small window in the corner of the second floor, Jacob saw the tranquil and beautiful garden from a window. He couldn't help but admire Helen's sense of design. Sophie's bedroom was the first room on the corner of the second floor. Jacob could tell by the tiny pink toy rabbit hanging on the door. He stood at the door and knocked. No sound came from the inside. Hello? Will you let me come in? Jacob stood there for a few seconds. You can go complain to my parents if you want. Sophie's heavy voice came from inside. Jacob smiled and took a few small steps on purpose to create the illusion of him walking downstairs. She quickly ran towards her door. She actually thought that Jacob had gone downstairs to tell on her. She ran out of the bedroom, wanting to drag Jacob from the stairs. However, she didn't anticipate that Jacob would still be standing at the door. She smashed right into his chest and lost her balance. Jacob grabbed her by the waist and caught her just in time. He bent low to meet her gaze and said, "Could you not keep falling down all the time?" Sophie felt the warmth of his strong arms and hand on her waist. Jacob continued to talk while still holding her. "Do you think I'm the kind of person who would tell on you?" Sophie blushed hard and slowly began to raise her head and her body. She straightened herself upright. Jacob slowly let go of her waist, but kept on looking at her. "You sure look like a person who would tell on me, but I'm glad you didn't." She looked up at him and smiled. Jacob walked into her bedroom and got a playful slap from Sophie on the back. "Hey, where are your manners? Don't just randomly come into my bedroom." Jacob turned around to meet her gaze and came closer to her. "You have a problem with me entering my fiancé's bedroom?" "You..." Sophie stared at Jacob. She was hesitant, but somehow she didn't want him to go away. Jacob looked at her eyes. They were red. It was clear she had been crying. He saw this and dropped the idea of teasing her anymore. He pretended to look around her bedroom casually. A poster of Sophie as a kid riding on her father's back in his dragon form was hammered in on top of the bed. She had a wide smile across her face. Now Sophie was a high school girl, unhappy and confused about her future. Jacob sat down next to her on the bed and joined her in her silence.